Christine, the founder of the Healing Yoga and the Home Yoga Practice Workshop. But most of all, I'm a longtime home yoga practitioner since the 80s. I'm a yoga guide, and today I will be talking with Jeena Thomas, 200-hour registered yoga teacher and a healing yoga guide. She teaches for Badlands Yoga and also for Sote Sanctuary in Jordan, Minnesota. She is a mindful mother, a compassionate nurse, and a true adventurer. Her yoga practice is a touchstone for peace and vitality in her very full life. Living each moment in the present, lighthearted and carefree. Jeena is also a Usui Holy Fire Karuna World Peace Reiki Master and teacher since 2019, being of service to others by promoting happiness, health, and creative growth in all aspects of life for everybody. Welcome, Jeena. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm so glad that we got this time to talk because I know your evolution in terms of a home yogi, but I think you already had a home yoga practice when we met. Is that true?
Yeah, my whole yoga journey, looking back at it, has started with home yoga practice, and in-person yoga practice is rather new to me.
Isn't that amazing? I had a similar experience. What do you see as the relationship between your lead practices when you attend a class and your home yoga practice?
Yeah, I feel like my home yoga practices prepares me for class led. So I kind of know where I'm going or know my own limits within the class because I spent that time with myself, um, with my breathing, with my presence in my body. But then going to classes kind of inspires me to add different aspects of a yoga class into my home practice. It's like, oh, I would have never thought of that sequence or doing that breath work in this way. So I feel like they complement each other so beautifully.
Oh, I love that. I love that. When did your home yoga practice start?
Yeah, I started practicing home yoga in about 2015, primarily for the physical practice. Found myself on YouTube with Yoga with Adriene. I feel like that may be a common starting place for some people around that time. And it was a 30-day practice, and through that, I was beginning to discover yoga is more than moving, so much more.
Yes, yes. And I know that in your home practice, you've been exploring a lot of the different facets of yoga. So let me, before we go that direction, that was also just a few years before you became a Usui Reiki master. Did those two have anything to do with one another?
Yeah, through it seemed like I started taking Reiki about the same time I was practicing yoga, and I noticed a lot of similarities just through learning about energy and how energy is everywhere and how to work with energy within your own body to help heal. Um, and through discovery in yoga does that too. And so they kind of, to me, help solidify the two together, but they're also so different at the same time.
Yeah, I feel like we could probably talk about that for an hour in and of itself.
Yes.
So your experience with Reiki really informs how you see yoga affecting your own and others' prana.
Yeah.
That's really cool. What has been the biggest revelation to you lately in your own home yoga practice?
I think what I've really discovered, especially looking back, hindsight 2020, is how much my home yoga practice helps me on and off the mat. Going through sometimes the hard times on the mat, trying to calm your mind or, you know, flow into a different breath pattern to um, work with energy, prepared me for some stressful things in life and exciting things too. Um, where in the time looking back, maybe stressful things could make me feel crumbly. And now it's like, okay, yoga practice, I got you. I'm buckled up. I know how to deal. I know how to get through this. This is all part of
Wow, that's just
it.
so beautiful. And it's such a great demonstration of how we're really practicing for life off the mat. Is there is there a technique that you call on in stressful moments? Or how does that work for you?
I think the one I would say technique would just be breath awareness and just having awareness of what's going on around me um, that's just going on. That's just reality. I'm over here, and my breath can anchor me present, or my breath can keep me from acting on emotions. I can be more present and just experience and trust. Um, and know that whatever's going on, if I have my breath, my anchor, I'll be okay.
Yes. And I think that there's such an interesting duality there between, I mean, we always have our breath. I mean, unless we're having a horrible asthma or something, right? But
Right.
there's being breathing and there's feeling that you're breathing.
Mhm.
Do you include pranayama in every morning practice, or how does that work for you?
I
Or
do in different ways. Yeah, I do in different ways. And that's the beauty too, is there's so many different pranayamas. Like you could just be doing your sun salutations and syncing your breath with your movement. Or as of late it's been Kapalabhati breath, or, a more forceful breathing to shift energy. And sometimes it's just breath awareness, just, hey, I'm stuffy. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it through these breathing techniques, but how can I just work with my breath to get through that too?
That's amazing. How do you approach teaching breath when you are leading the practice?
Yeah, teaching breath work, it's I think it's challenging, just in your own practice to know. So I do always teach with grace to understand that just like moving the body, shifting your breath for pranayama can sometimes be hard. So to be gentle with yourself and to have that awareness, to pay attention to how you're feeling. If you're feeling lightheaded and things like that, to not practice, um, and yeah, I guess just practicing our breath as we center ourselves, connecting with our breath through ujjayi breath to have that audible noise or that anchor in our practice, keeping it simple.
Yes, and I think that's what I appreciate about in your yin classes, because yin is not so much breath techniques as observation, and
Hmm.
so just gentle reminders to come back and, oh yeah, there's that going on too. Um, and I love the way that you approach that, and I think that the word grace is is a perfect touch point for that. How do you see the yamas and niyamas functioning in terms of your home yoga practice?
Yeah. So for the yamas, like are the things that we try to avoid, being like, for instance, like nonviolent. how does that flow into your yoga practice? Would be mindful of your thoughts, right? Yoga is how you feel within a pose, so not judging yourself for not being able to go into a pose or a certain shape. Um, or being kind to your body and not trying to go beyond what your body can do, because you've done it before, even. Um, Coming back to a place of beginning each time, not um, overindulging, not just doing one certain type of yoga because it's more simple, having just changing up your practice to create a little more heat, to create a little bit more fire, knowing that there's a balance in life too. Um, yeah.
Is there, so we did, you mentioned how present the yamas and niyamas are for you before we started, which is why I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to talk about it a little bit. This is just something that has come up for me, and I'm wondering if there are, where do you see grace in the yamas and niyamas? Do you see it as any one in particular, or how, what's that relationship to you?
Yeah, grace. I feel like grace can come in almost in a sense of, even like in Santosha, finding that contentment. Can you find grace in pain, and can you find grace in like the beauty too? Like, can you find that ease within those, or just the gentleness?
I love that. I love that approach. So you mentioned pain a little bit. Tell me how your yoga practice has interacted with pain and how you've worked with your yoga practice through that.
Yeah, it could be, physical pain or emotional pain,
Mm.
or mental pain. Um, so in physical pain, understanding, like right now, my knee is just feeling lovely. Like knowing to be gentle with myself at shifting my practice, um, and not stopping my practice completely, maybe focusing on other parts of my practice, or um, pain. Um, Sometimes even just in maybe not pain, but discomfort, even in like when you're meditating or you're somewhere you're a little uncomfortable, how can you be okay with being there a little bit where it's not causing injury to yourself? Um, but how can you be there a little bit through your breathing or backing out of something a little bit? Um, Ram Dass, he said that pain was what really, he wrote out his pain in his final years of life. Um, he had he had a stroke, and he had some pain from some things. And he said his pain was what led him on his meditation journey. And when you think of meditation, sometimes you think, oh, it's going to feel great, but how can you learn to accept things that aren't always so comfortable, just with acceptance?
Right, right. Knowing what you can shift and then being present with what's also there.
Hmm.
That's amazing. Um, I had three questions in mind. Ooh. Hmm. I think what I want to ask about next, you know, I'll just tell you what came up for me when you were saying that is the degree to which I hear I have lots of conversations with yoga teachers about their home practice, and frequently it will be when they've become injured, right? A wrist injury, back injury, and neck injury. And frequently what brings someone to me is that they've injured something that means they can't do sun salutations anymore. And what I hear the most, they'll be like, yeah, I do the breath and the chanting and all that. but I feel like I'm not doing yoga. And then the second thing that I hear a lot, and this one I've had a lot of experience with myself, is the sense that like my feeling like my body's betrayed me. And what I hear when you talk about home yoga practice is not, I don't hear any sense of betrayal. And I hear a sense of inclusivity and what Tara Brach would call radical acceptance. When you have an obstacle on the mat, is that radical acceptance ever difficult for you? And how do you find your way toward it?
Absolutely, it can be difficult. But then I am so tired of beating myself up in life. You know, it's taking that, I'm so tired of, and this is something I've had to go through on my journey. I'm tired of being my own victim. So I've had to just realize, like, hey, for me, this is for me. Sometimes I have to almost, I get kind of like Sergeant Drill Army with myself, you know, like, hey, stop. If I notice I'm going down maybe a negative way of thinking, like, oh, I can't do this. My knee's hurting. I can't practice. You know, I can't do the asana practice. Am I being less than? Um, then it's when I really lean on my other practices, like, hey, why don't you prove to yourself, if you don't believe it, the truly what yoga is? I dare you.
Well, and even when you're saying this, at least right now, there's a sense of like humor and lightness, like,
Mhm.
ah, yes, yeah. And I really appreciate that about you as a person and you as a teacher, is this sense of like, maybe it is your journey as a mom that gives you this ability to be both a little bit stern and light at the same time.
Mhm.
So I very much appreciate that about you. Um, we've covered a lot of ground. I wanted to touch base on, do you have, because I know that it's a part of your home yoga practice, do you have any, if someone wanted to get into chanting in particular, or mantra, do you have, what wisdom would you give them on that account?
Yeah, I with mantra first started through Spotify, just listening to kirtan songs. And so I feel like language, I know that language is very powerful. So for me, and this is kind of how I got rid of my, you know, my doubt sometimes in my head, is replacing my thoughts with mantra. So in the car, I would play kirtan. Um, Now, if you could plug in and hear my brain space, probably all the time I'm chanting some sort of mantra in some way in my head, or writing it down, or that's what I love to doodle. I'm on the phone a lot at work. I'll just write down mantras. I change my passwords. You know, good luck getting in now, everybody. But my passwords a lot of times are mantras. I think just I used to really want to know what they meant. Um, but the more that I'm discovering, the more that I just sit and listen and feel before I start Googling what things mean. So if I like the way it sounds, I know it's coming from pure source. I'll just listen to the song. I start singing it eventually. And then I'll look up, oh, wow, that's powerful.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and I think that's so, I think that that is such a profound piece of wisdom. Because you're right, people will often say, if I've given them a mantra, specifically, oh, what do the words mean? And as you know, sometimes in the mantra you can give like a translation, and sometimes there are parts of the mantra that are not, they're called particles and they're not translatable. Um,
Mhm.
And I think it's so interesting because we don't say, well, what are the words that are already in my head mean? In the same way that we're like, well, before I start that, and I'm not, I don't want to, it is important to know what you're taking in. And I endorse being curious and responsible in that way. And if you have just a beginning understanding, also understanding that part of why you're doing it is you're replacing some stuff that's going on. And of course, I point to the head, but it's really going on here, right? It may be something that just says, may all beings everywhere be happy. That might sound insipid, but it's a heck of a lot better than denigrating self-talk, which is, I think, what a lot of people are replacing with that. Or worry, stress, strain, worry, and fear, replacing that with something as simple as may all beings everywhere be happy, or lokaha samastaha. I think that that's your story about how you approached it is beautiful for that reason. So thank you. And I do feel like we could continue to talk for a really long time. And I want to thank you for sharing your heart for practice and your expertise with us today. And I look forward to perhaps continuing our conversation another time. For today, though, what is one thing that you would tell somebody who wanted to start their own home yoga practice? What one gift over and above what you've already given us would you want them to remember from our discussion today?
I would just say show up, because you're showing up for you, and that's the hardest part, and that's all you ever have to do is just acknowledge that, hey, I'm showing up for myself right now, whether that be because you're practicing asana, you're gonna just lay on your mat for a little bit, or you're gonna read some yoga philosophy or what have you. Just show up and know that that's exactly where you need to be.
Brilliant. I am honored to have spent this time with you today. And Jeena can be found on Instagram and on Facebook, and our handles will be in the comments below, or through Badlands Yoga's Facebook and Instagram pages. Our home yoga practice tip for today is set up your space. So the first principle of healing yoga is that the techniques of yoga create a container for our experience. And as a home yoga practitioner, we have to create the container. And that's when we go to a lead practice, part of what the teacher does for us. Space is such a huge part of the container. So if you have time for one thing, and you're either refreshing or starting a home yoga practice, start with addressing your space. Grab your mat if you use a mat. Roll it out and stand on it in the space that you think will be best, or maybe the space you've been using for your home yoga practice, in your home or your office or out of doors. If you don't have a mat, select a space that's about a foot longer than you are tall and wider than your shoulders. If you're super lucky, wider than your wingspan. And then notice, what are you facing? What is your visual field from where you have selected? Does it relax and inspire you? And how can you arrange things so that what you're looking at during your time on the mat contributes to your feelings of well-being? I personally like a simple space, which is why our yoga studio is very simple. But oftentimes people use altars, statues, and flowers to mark a space and to give themselves a focal point for their time on the mat. You have a candle, an aromatherapy diffuser, flowers that you can use to mark the space, but also as part of your ritual for beginning your yoga practice. Every time I begin my yoga practice, I will light this candle or smell that flower or something. Finally, I like to refresh my yoga practice when I'm feeling a little bit stale by just sweeping, mopping, dusting, whatever would make the space feel squared away. And that can be my yoga practice for a day. Because if I have 30 minutes, and it takes me 30 minutes to vacuum or sweep or mop, and maybe wash down, I like to wash down the door jambs with salt water. It's a traditional way of cleansing space. That's my yoga practice. And then I come into that setup space the next day. Do you have a way of refreshing your space, Jeena?
Yeah, that is definitely one way through cleaning. I call it sacred homemaking, or just and I'll do sometimes too. I'm like, well, just incorporate some yoga shapes.
Right? As your,
Mhm.
and vacuuming is kind of twisting, and
Mhm.
sweeping, you can really get the twist into it. I love that. And then the final part of this is sometimes it's helpful to let your family and your roomies know that, hey, I'm setting this space up, and when I'm here, I'm making myself better for all of us. And that can help everybody. And who knows, maybe you inspire somebody to have their own home yoga practice. We are glad you are here. Until next time, happy Yoga Day, and may they all be Yoga Day.